Hi there, my name's Rosa Dawn and today I'm going to be talking about the recent gender critical protest that took place at Pride in London. But what was the protest actually about? Give it up, gonna be alright. On the 7th of July, a group of radical lesbian activists took over the start of the annual Pride in London parade to protest what they see as the erasure of lesbian rights following the rise of trans activism. The group, known as Get the L Out, received a mixed response online, earning a fair amount of praise and criticism for their actions. The mainstream and queer media, along with Pride in London and even free speech-loving London Mayor Sadiq Khan, condemned the group for being bigots and transphobic, which the activists deny. But what were they actually protesting about, and is there any truth to the accusations thrown their way? The leaflet available on their website makes it clear what Get the L Out are protesting about. In their words, Get the L Out is a group of lesbian and feminist individuals and organisations opposing the increasingly anti-lesbian and misogynistic LGBT movement and the erasure of lesbians. We believe that lesbian rights are under attack by the trans movement, and we encourage lesbians everywhere to leave the LGBT and form their own independent movement, as well as to be vocal and take action against proposed changes to the Gender Recognition Act. Before I go into detail, I need to let it be known that I reached out to Get the L Out prior to writing this video in an attempt to hear their side of what went down. Unfortunately, I didn't receive a response from them, and as such, I'm basing this discussion on their own information available through their website, along with quotes they provided to other media outlets. One of the key points from the leaflet handed out during the protest was the idea that lesbians are being coerced to sleep with men. They say the trans movement, with the complicity of queer LGBT policies, is coercing lesbians to have sex with men. We firmly condemn the vicious form of anti-lesbianism disguised as progress. We stand for the rights of lesbians to choose their sexual partners on the basis of their sex, not their gender identity. We condemn any pressure on lesbians such as rape and death threats or calling lesbians transphobic if they refuse so-called trans women as sexual partners and do not accept the penis as a female organ. These threats and name-calling are coercive and a manifestation of rape culture. To be clear, when they say sex with men, they are referring to trans women. And whilst I disagree that trans women are men, there is a valid concern they're actually expressing here. Get the L Out are making reference to the cotton ceiling, which is the idea that people need to learn to open up their sexuality to include trans people, but specifically lesbians. The cotton ceiling, which has been popularised by trans activists including Julia Serrano and Riley Dennis, was first coined by porn star Drew DeVue in 2012, and has been a controversial point of discussion ever since. The cotton ceiling argument is often downplayed by trans activists, but sadly, it's one that persists in queer spaces. I've known people who have been in situations where they were labelled transphobic for not being interested in penises. And in a community that punishes wrong force as strongly as the queer community does, such an accusation could see them alienated from their friends as a suppressive person. I shouldn't need to explain that nobody chooses who they're attracted to, and that a particular sex organ, in this instance a male one, is going to be a deal breaker for women who like women. To consider a sexual preference to be transphobic is certainly not accepting of other sexualities. Dating as a trans woman is certainly tough. I've had relationships end because I'm transsexual, and more often than not, I'll just be a one-night stand for a guy rather than his girlfriend. But this is part and parcel of being transsexual. You can't demand that people should be attracted to you. And considering consent culture is a big part of queer and feminist communities, it's certainly concerning that this seems to be overwritten when it comes to trans people. As to whether I think a trans woman could be in a lesbian relationship, I'd certainly argue so if they were post-op. But even if that's the case, a lesbian not wanting to be with a trans woman isn't bigotry. There are bigger issues for trans people than demanding lesbians should sleep with them, and telling people to suck lady dick doesn't help the rape analogies. Get the L Out also state the trans activists are part of a conservative movement which reinforces sex stereotypes. There are two ways of reading this statement: that trans activists have a traditionalist view on what it means to be a man or a woman, or that the trans movement itself is conservative or right-wing. I can understand to an extent saying they have a fairly stereotypical view of being a man or a woman. After all, being a masculine woman or a feminine man is enough to put someone under the transgender umbrella. And people breaking from gender roles may label themselves as non-binary because they don't fit in with a typical view of gender. There's also the habit of saying a femme style consists of extreme female stereotypes, including glitter and unicorns. But I would say it's inaccurate to describe the movement as conservative. Truth be told, within the trans community, there's no consistent position on what it could mean to be any gender you choose. For example, a male who has a beard and thinning hair can consider themselves a woman or non-binary for what amounts to little more than ideological reasons. Self-ID is not a conservative approach to gender. If anything, it's more liberal authoritarian. You can say you have whatever gender you want, and everyone else has to accept it or be labelled a bigot. Under the trans movement, gender becomes a free-for-all, which is truthfully neither liberal nor conservative. But it's also important to recognise that modern-day trans activism and queer activism in general has ties to anarcho-communism, with many prominent activists being open supporters of Marxist beliefs. I've seen left-wing gender-critical feminists state trans activists cannot be left-wing because of their attitudes on gender. But this ultimately becomes a no true Scotsman argument, which has always been commonplace within left-wing movements, and trans activists are often quick to label gender-critical feminists as right-wing. Both sides are left-wing. They just need to remember that being right-wing is not a synonym for being bad, so to speak. Finally, Get the L Out states that transitioning is a form of conversion therapy. In their words, trans politics promotes the social transition of lesbians, encouraging them to present as straight men, thus favouring the pretense of heterosexuality over lesbianism. This is nothing more than a form of conversion therapy. What they're referring to here is trans men, rather than non-binary people. The more extreme side of the gender-critical debate often considers trans men to be nothing more than lesbians, and it's made clear this is their intention in a quote given to Gay Star News, where protester Jan Williams says, "Transgenderism is conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is wrong." While there are real concerns that people are being convinced to transition despite not having gender dysphoria, Get the L Out's blanket approach ignores medical evidence that gender dysphoria is indeed a real condition, and that transitioning is currently the best way to deal with it. By calling transition conversion therapy, they're revealing themselves as extremists right off the bat, and as such, they're unlikely to be listened to outside of gender-critical circles. Divisive rhetoric like this won't get them anywhere. Which is a shame, because as I mentioned earlier, there is indeed a real concern that people, mostly lesbians I might add, are being convinced they are transgender despite not having gender dysphoria, and as such, they're no longer labelling themselves as women at all. This is where the majority of the non-binary movement comes from. They are the ones requesting that women's groups no longer call themselves women only and need to be more inclusive of all the various genders that come with the modern queer movement. If Get the L Out are worried about lesbian identities being erased, this is what they need to look into. If they truly believe trans women are the sole pushers of the new trans movement, they're missing the bigger picture, whether it's through ignorance or pure misandry. So my thoughts on the protest itself are mixed. I understand their concerns about the cotton ceiling, but their blanket statement of transitioning is conversion therapy ignores the issue of gender radicals redefining gender in favour of attacking trans people in general. But what do you think? Do you agree with what the protesters said, or do you think they went too far? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and also follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you all next time.